Another movie that I had to go to the theaters to see, I went to go see Licorice Pizza. So I'll give you my thoughts and review of the new Paul Thomas Anderson film right after the jump. Hello everyone, Terrence here with Hollywood Already Did It. If you haven't already, go ahead and like, share, subscribe to the channel, ring that bell below. Anytime we have something, you will be among the first to know. Paul Thomas Anderson, also known as PTA, for those who like to acronym his name, has a pretty extensive filmography, for the most part, that I enjoy. Magnolia, Punch Drunk Love, There Will Be Blood. He has some bona fide hits. And so this film is his sort of coming of age love story to both late LA 70s and to some young kids on growing up through adolescence. Not without controversy, which I'll get into a bit here. I have to take this piece by piece. I know this has a bit of a controversial touch to it, so I'm not going to dance around anything. Licorice Pizza is about two young folks. One of them is Gary, who's a young boy, 15, and the other is Alana, who is a moving target age, but is clearly older than Gary is. Let's get to the positives. I think this is a well-filmed movie. I think some of the shots, the story beats, the tracking sequences, all are solid and fun to be a part of. I think Alana, who is playing, I think this is the first time doing a big film. She is wonderful and effervescent to watch. Cooper Hoffman also falls in that bag. Not as good. His performance doesn't stand out to me as much as hers does, but Philip Seymour would be proud of his young man. He just puts on a pretty solid performance, but it hit linchpins on her, and her being the apple of young Gary's eye. The movie, however, has a couple of issues for me. One, let's talk about some of the controversies that I think this has. One, there's something that they just can't erase or get rid of. It's the blatant disrespect that they have for the Asian community, Japanese community. I don't have a problem with films using past history. When you take a snapshot of something that happened in the past, especially if it's part of the story, to look at, and yes, there may be racism, there may be some hate that is thrown their way. This film doesn't need to do it. Like, outside of two scenes, neither of which are key to anything that is happening in this film, there doesn't need to be any outright blatant racism towards the Asian community. And I don't know what was gained from that. Like, if you cut those scenes out and removed them and smush the film together, you'd still get the exact same movie. Like, those are there specifically. And I think that's why some of the uproar is coming up, is because there's no reason for it. It just happens. And outside of that, I think this film could elevate. For a lot of people who are like, I like that movie, or I love this movie, it's sort of hard to do that when you're just wearing this badge of honor, like, hey, I like to be racist. In my side time, when I can be, I like to be blatantly racist. It makes me uncomfortable. And what was more uncomfortable is that I was in an audience where there were some people chuckling and laughing, and there were some people like, that's not funny. And it's hard. I say if you're doing stuff that happens in the past, you have to kind of roll with the punches with that. But I think there's a difference between something like Django Unchained, which this whole story is about slavery and whatnot, whereas there's literally nothing that affects the main characters about that story beat or why that is necessary. The other thing is the age difference between the two leads. Look, let's not beat around the bush. If the genders were reversed, and if there was an older man courting a younger woman, this movie would get none of the kudos. That it would get exploded. Like, everybody would lose their damn mind about this. It's not. We have an older woman and a younger man. Here's the thing, though. I feel like she is not a accurate age teller. Her age has sort of been on the sliding thing, where she says she was 25 when she first meets Gary, but it's a pause. It's like, I'm 25, because in her brain she's still sort of trying to lie to Gary and not trying to give up her age or say that she's too old to go out with somebody as gross and young as he is. Later, when John Peters played amazingly by Bradley Cooper in a little cameo-ish appearance, she says she's 28, so the age goes up. So it seems like she plays with her age according to what sort of fits her needs. When she's around other folks, they're like, hey, she's a young girl or a young woman, I can't quite tell. Like, she carries herself older. She has thoughts and beliefs of things that are older, but I don't know if she's drastically older than Gary is. I feel like she might be in the 20 range, which still is terrible, still is an issue, but it's a stark difference with 25, because that seems like commercial grooming him, than it is them just having to be four years apart. Again, it's still a problem. There were moments when I was like, is she really that old? And then as I went along, I was like, she might not be that age. And I just kind of started falling more into it. I was like, okay, fine, I accept this, whatever. It's the least of this movie's problems for me. This movie's biggest issue is that it's a series of nothing. It is sort of like taking a lot of different moments of time of getting into hijinks, getting into jobs, trying things, but failing at things, but doing it with somebody that you care about over the course of time, that anyone who was not white will be like, what the fuck is this? Because there's nothing that I can relate to. There's nothing that I think most people of color will be like, yeah, that doesn't do anything for me whatsoever. This falls into that category of like mid-90s and like Boyhood, which I think filmatically in Oscar type of films, kudos, people will chew that up. But when you start dealing with the black, brown, and Asian community, you're gonna be like, why did I sit through this? Like, there's nothing here for me. And a lot of the things that these folks get into, a lot of the stuff like I already spoke to about the gender alone, but some of the hijinks, some of the blatant destruction of property, the problems that these kids do, they get a slap on the wrist because they're white kids. Whereas I think that had this been somewhere else, we're all sitting there like, that's the biggest part of the problem? That's it? Just falling in love? I wish I could have those problems. So for me, it becomes a relatability issue. Like, I think everything here looks fine. I just don't, at the end of the day, I don't care about these characters or what they've gone through or anything that has happened in this entire film. There are some great performances hidden into a film that for me is just a series of things that don't bring my enjoyment or my heart or my care out in any form whatsoever. Which is probably the first time that it's happened for a PTA film. I know a lot of his films are centrally around Caucasian folks, but there's usually some type of other thread going through that can kind of connect to me. I think when we started doing this love, where the love is, there's just that big of a discrepancy, or there's just something just off about it, I have to find something else to connect to. And if I don't, then I'm just sitting here watching a series of snapshots of moments throughout young folks' life. So for me, I wasn't really feeling this flick. So on my scale of play it again, Sam, hey, I didn't mind that. Once is enough, or give me a time stone so I never have to think about this film again. Because I do think that Alana is probably going to get nominated, because I think at the very least her performance should be seen, I'll say this once is enough. It's close on that. I never want to give me a time stone so I never have to think about this film again, but I think there is some good things that she is doing character moment-wise, character-wise, from scene to scene, that I think at least should be seen, and she should get her kudos for that. Outside of everything, outside of that, you can throw the rest of this film away. I get nothing from Licorice Pizza, and I know there are critics who are loving, like, oh my god, this is fantastic, it's a little slice of life of the 90s, but those same people also like mid-90s and still also like Boyhood. If those films aren't really in your wheelhouse, then this isn't going to do anything for you. But those are my thoughts. I know there are a ton of people who enjoy Licorice Pizza, but for this one, it misses me. It's not my cup of tea. What did you guys think about Licorice Pizza? Go ahead and leave your thoughts and comments in the comments below. If you haven't already, go ahead and follow us on Twitter at HollywoodADI. You can hit us up on email at HollywoodAlreadyDidIt@gmail.com. We also have a podcast by the same name. That's on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere that plays podcasts. We're there. And like always, I got my ticket. You got yours.